Welcome to the second episode of Decoding Devy, and I have another great guest this week, Matt Breuning at Sports Fanatic MB. Matt, thanks for joining.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on. I'm thrilled to be on here and talking with you, just you and me for once, not on tailgate with those losers, Austin and Colin. I love Moxley; he's super smart, but just you and me talking a little Devy. I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you both work at Campus to Canton on the site, and you have all the a million shows that you do there. Devy debate and everything else. Is there any special projects you got coming up anytime soon?
We have some stuff. Yeah, I can't announce one of them, but if you guys check out campus2canton.com, we do everything over there: NFL, Devy, a lot of college stuff. This off season, we're going to be heavy into rookie profiles, videos, and all that stuff. So that's stuff I can talk about. Come by, check that out. We talk a lot of college stuff, and then obviously rookies. You've got guys like you, me, Austin, Colin, who have watched these players for years. We're going to dive in and hopefully do some rookie videos. We got some mock draft stuff we were just talking about earlier as well that we're going to try and do. So a lot of content coming on the YouTube page. Check that out. As for other stuff, stay locked into Campus to Canton. You can find them at Campus to Canton on Twitter as well. We got some special projects coming down the line that I would be murdered if I mentioned here. But maybe I'll give you a sneak peek later, and you can invite me back at some point, and I'll drop it for all of your listeners.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, definitely. Bunch of good stuff coming out there. So, I brought you on. You're a Buckeye, so as we see, Wolverines and Buckeyes can somewhat coexist. Begrudgingly, I let you come on the show. Um, so last I wanted to have someone that was a Buckeye on because I wanted to talk about the Michigan State Ohio State game that just happened this past week, and then preview the Michigan Ohio State game coming up. So for the Michigan State game, what were some of your reactions? I know you didn't think it was going to be anything like that type of game, that big of a blowout. So what were you surprised by, in that game?
Yeah, I was surprised that they blew them out the way that they did. I think the opening line, and it stayed pretty close to the 19 points throughout the week. And I talked all week that I did not think that was the way it was going to be. Earlier in the year, we saw Ohio State's defense really struggled with the run. And then they played a lot of teams that did not have good running backs. We thought, hey, Kenneth Walker coming in this game, he was a Heisman favorite, had pretty much run all over everybody, even Michigan, who's got a really good run defense. He didn't have a huge day against them, if we're being honest, but he had a bunch of big plays, and that's what mattered. That's what ended up doing it in for Michigan. And I thought he could do the same thing against Ohio State. Maybe he didn't have like a 5.5 yard per carry average, but he hit a couple big plays and scored some touchdowns, but they were really able to shut him down. And I wonder if some of that was, which I did not know this going into the game, they were down 2 offensive linemen. They were down a linebacker. They were down a cornerback, and they were down their top wide receiving option. And I wonder how much of that really played into this offense. There was a lot of talk, too, on the broadcast that Kenneth Walker, was a little bit beat up. He came off a week of 30-plus carries, and we saw them kind of using him sparingly earlier in the game. They were using the backup Simmons there a lot. So maybe that was some of why they didn't go through. But I think really the biggest key for them was just how bad Michigan State's defense is against the pass. We saw it was Cade McNamara's best game as a passer, and I think we can all be honest, Cade McNamara is probably at best an average college quarterback. And so when you get a guy out there like CJ Stroud with the weapons that he has at wide receiver, that was probably a recipe for disaster. And props to Ryan Day in that offense. They really game planned around that, and they hit Michigan State with a bunch of big plays that ended up costing them the game.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I actually missed the first few minutes of the game, so some of that is good to know because I did notice, Kenneth Walker wasn't really getting a lot of carries early, and I think when they decided to start giving him the ball, it was a little late because they were already down a couple touchdowns, and I think finally it caught up with Michigan State. I thought Ohio State would win fairly easily, but nothing like what happened. I think they had been playing above their talent level all year, and they finally, met a team that can kind of play on all those weaknesses. So, they shut down Michigan State pretty well. It was 14-0, and Michigan State was driving. And on that one play, which I can't believe they called it incomplete when it looked like it was a Jalen Reed fumble. Were you surprised by that
Yeah.
play?
I was, but I'll be honest because I'm like I'm as much as I love Ohio State, I'm also a little bit of a hater at times. I was hoping that it was going to be called incomplete because I did not want to see Ohio State get the ball back because I really thought that was going to turn the tide even more for the Buckeyes. Plus, I just wanted to see Kenneth Walker have a good game so we could tell Felix he was wrong on tailgate because anytime I can tell Felix he's wrong, I love it. It makes my day. So,
Definitely. And, once they, and then, I mean, even if they get a field goal there, I don't know if it matters that much, but maybe just morale
yeah.
standpoint, it was different when they missed that there. And then, once it started rolling after that, I was surprised too by their game plan. It just did not look like Michigan State was overly prepared for the game. I know
Yeah.
that that like Ohio State, they always when they play Michigan, they're always amped for that and always play their best. But they usually play pretty well against Ohio State, I feel too. So that was very surprising. I would have thought that they would have let everything short for Stroud and Ohio State, but they let those deep bombs and played a lot more man. It looked like man, and those great receivers at Ohio State just took advantage. So that was a little bit surprising for me. Do you think this was just an off game for Michigan State, or do you think this Ohio State defense is finally starting to improve and kind of take form?
I mean, it's hard to say that I don't think that they're starting to improve too much because if you go back a couple weeks against Nebraska, and I can't remember for the life of me now who the other game was that they played, the defense wasn't that good. They barely won those games. I think the biggest thing here for Michigan State was kind of what you just mentioned in Mel Tucker just didn't really seem to have a plan. I think once he kind of got punched in the mouth there with those wide receivers, they just didn't know what to do. I think maybe the issue with Michigan State was they tried too hard to do everything, as in try and stop the receiving game and stop Henderson. I think they should have just focused on trying to slow down the receiving game as much as possible. And if Henderson eats, Henderson eats. I think the big thing with that is you're going to burn a lot of time on the clock with them running plays, and that still gives you a chance to get back into it if Kenneth Walker was playing healthy. But the defense, I think this is going to be their biggest test because Michigan is, in my opinion, with Haskins now. I know, and you'll be able to tell me this. I think Cora might still miss again this week, which could be huge. But with those two running backs, like if that running game can get going, we've seen Cade McNamara can play really good in the play action and everything. I think they'll be able to challenge the secondary a little bit because Burke is beat up a little bit as well. We saw him go down and injure his shoulder. I believe he's going to play this week anyways, but he's been really the solidifying factor in that secondary. He has not given up a receiving touchdown all year. As a freshman, I think he's the next best cornerback to come out of Ohio State. He's been phenomenal. We talked a little bit about him on the tailgate this past week. When they played Purdue recently. That's who it was, Purdue. But Purdue was actually a blowout as well. He was on David Bell, and like 11 of his 16 targets was when he was on Burke, and Burke only allowed him to get 5 catches for 35 yards. He ended up with 100 plus on 6 other catches where he was on different cornerbacks. So Burke, I think, could be huge in this one. But then again, Michigan, they build around that running attack, right? So that's where I think could be dangerous because they don't really have that high end or a guy who's playing as that high end wide receiver to challenge that secondary.
Yeah, we'll definitely go into that more, but that's exactly what I was thinking. They really spread it amongst those wide receivers, so there's not really an alpha wide receiver on that team. So that advantage might not mean as much. But and going back to Michigan State, during the Michigan game, one thing Michigan does not have is what Ohio State has in that killer instinct to go for the throat on a team. They are actually up 7-0 on Michigan State, had the ball, threw a pass out to Blake Corum. He dropped it. He probably would have scored a touchdown. They got a turnover and ended up just getting a field goal. So they could have been up 21-0 also, but their offense isn't clicking, especially through the passing game as much as Ohio State. So that was a big thing too. So this probably, for all purposes, takes Kenneth Walker out of the Heisman. So this is Stroud versus Young now for Heisman, don't you think?
Yeah, I think even if Michigan State, which I still think they were going to lose regardless of the game plan last week, but I think even if Walker had gone out there and ran for like 150 or 200 yards and a couple touchdowns like he did against Michigan, that he would still be in the, maybe not the lead, but at least there with those two still for the most part. But I think with the fact that he only got 25 yards, that effectively knocks him out of it. And it comes down to Stroud and Young. And I don't know which way it's going to go. A lot of people are saying that it's Stroud's to lose, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But when I look at it, and the reason I would probably give it to Young is they're putting up comparable numbers when it comes to touchdowns, interceptions, yards, everything. The difference in the elevation I'll give to Young is he doesn't have the best wide receiver core in the country around him like CJ Stroud does. I've been looking a little bit into quarterbacks and their passing before and after the catch. And if you take away the yards after the catch, which again, and granted is like really kind of digging deep into the stats, the CJ Stroud's only thrown for 1,500 yards, where Bryce Young is still thrown for 1,700. So he's still passing the ball a little bit deeper down the field, in my opinion. He doesn't have those weapons. I mean, Jameson Williams couldn't make it in the Buckeyes wide receiver room, goes to Alabama and is the best wide receiver they have. They're also playing better competition for the most part. So in my opinion, I think it should go to Bryce Young, but the Heisman voters don't have to put their votes in until after the championship games. And I think if Bama loses to Georgia, unless it's a really, really close game and Bryce Young plays out of his mind, but it's like the Alabama defense gives up a late touchdown or something like that, likely CJ Stroud and the Buckeyes are going to win the Big Ten championship game. Maybe not easily, but I think they'll beat Wisconsin, who's likely going to be the team that they play. I think once that happens, CJ Stroud wins, and if Bryce Young loses, it's going to go to Stroud.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think what is going to hurt Bryce Young is he's going to have to play Georgia in that SEC championship game, where Ohio State most likely, if they win, will play Wisconsin. And we've kind of seen how this story kind of goes when Ohio State plays Wisconsin. Wisconsin keeps it close for maybe a quarter and a half, and then they just don't have the athletes to stop Ohio State consistently with that passing game. And I think that's going to be the biggest part. And what you're saying about the yards after catch is a big thing, but I don't know how many like voters actually are going to like think about that. They might just stat
They won't.
watch kind
Yeah.
of. So that's the biggest thing. But no, I agree on that. Back to Ohio State. So Julian Fleming had a touchdown. So are we going to see an uptick next year with him at all, do you think? Or is it just going to be the freshman this year taking his spot and he just got in the game there to get a touchdown?
I actually think we might. Brian Hartline really talks him up every chance that he gets. Anytime someone asks a question about him, the biggest thing with him is he's dealt with a hamstring injury all year. In the spring and everything, it was a shoulder injury. So he's consistently been beat up, which is obviously kind of bad for him. If you talk to as Felix loves to say, the spreadsheet simps, it's not going to look good for Julian Fleming's pro prospects and the fact that he doesn't break out until his third year. But I don't know that Mecca or Marvin Harrison do what Julian Fleming can do, and that's stretch the field. Both those guys, I think, are more of your like a Mecca. Mecca's likely going to be in the slot, and then I think that moves JSN to the outside next year. And I think Fleming might get that job over Harrison because he stretches the field a little bit better than I think Mecca and Marvin Harrison do. I think Mecca can stretch the field. We've seen him do a lot after the catch in the games when he's gotten in. But Julian Fleming has like all state speed. He does a little bit different. So yeah, I think he can break out next year, especially Stroud. We're assuming keeps the job and continues to improve. I mean, his improvement from earlier in the year to where we are now has been incredible. Now you go and give him an entire offseason with Ryan Day. He's probably going to look even better. If Fleming can stay healthy, as crazy as this is to say, because I feel like I've shit on him more than the other two in Jason and G. Scott. G. Scott doesn't even play wide receiver anymore. I think Julian Fleming might be a buy this offseason because I really think he can be what Chris Olave is in this offense next year. And we've seen that Ryan Day loves those long developing plays down the field to hit those wide receivers for a deep shot. And again, Olave, he can't come back again. So he's gone to the NFL, and I think that's going to be Fleming more than Mecca, more than Marvin Harrison. So as long as he stays healthy, Fleming could be in for a big season in 2022.
Well, that's good to hear. A little bit of variety for them. And that'll still be a very good wide receiving core. Do you think there's any chance with Stroud's great connection with JSN that it's just going to be a lot more to one receiver than it normally is for Ohio State?
No, because we saw this with Justin Fields a little bit. He had that connection with Olave that first year, and then when Garrett Wilson kind of stepped up last year, it actually shifted to him more than it did Chris Olave. I think JSN's still going to be the one, but the biggest thing for him is I think defenses are going to key in more on him, kind of like they have with Garrett Wilson this year, which I think is why we've seen JSN break out so much. I actually think Mecca might be the JSN next year because if JSN moves outside and they put Mecca in the slot, I think that's where Stroud might start to focus more. Like again, I think Fleming, he could have a Olave type season where he has like not that many catches, but I think a lot. So the funny thing with that is with the Ohio State receiving room, and I think JSN just recently passed Garrett Wilson because of how much he does after the catch, which is just ridiculous. So that dude can catch the ball anywhere and take it to the house. But going up until the past couple of weeks, it was Olave was leading in touchdowns, Wilson was leading in yards, but JSN was leading in receptions. And I could really see that happening next year as well, but in an order of like maybe JSN leading in yards because of how good he is after the catch, Fleming leading in touchdowns because he's that deep shot guy, and maybe Mecca leading in catches. Like, I just think with the way Ryan Day builds this offense, they don't tend to focus on one player. They move all those guys around, and the way that they recruit, all those guys can play everywhere. I don't know that Julian Fleming can play in the slot, but he can move around anywhere else on the field, as can JSN and Mecca and Marvin Harrison. So I think regardless, JSN I think will be the best of those three because he is. In my opinion, he's the best wide receiver in the room right now, and that includes Garrett Wilson and Olave. Like if I'm projecting those three to the NFL, JSN is the one that I think has the best and highest upside in the NFL. So he's still going to be the alpha dog. But as pass friendly as that offense is, and let's be honest, you're a Big Ten fan. Outside of a couple schools in the Big Ten, there's a lot of teams you can beat up on. So I think the others will get theirs, especially in those games.
No, I tend to agree with that. I want to get your opinion on this too. I'm a big Chris Olave fan. I think it's mostly because I saw him, a very seldom used torch Michigan in that 2018 game. When he, came out of nowhere. I just feel like whenever Ohio State has a big game, say Michigan State, Michigan, all those, Chris Olave always has huge games against like really good teams. I don't know if that's a scheme thing or he just, he's a big time player in those games. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I think he's the trusted guy. I mean, him again. He does something a little bit different than those other two do. Wilson, while he had the big catch this past week, I think it was like a 60-yard bomb down the field. Wilson and JSN are not quite used that way. Like JSN gets a lot of those swing passes or those throws right or 5, 6, 7 yards around and then gone. Olave takes those deep shots, and that is what Ryan Day likes to do. We saw it perpetrated a lot more with Justin Fields, and I think that's because he has that beautiful like moonshot like Russell Wilson does, right? Or he throws those deep ball, and it was always Olave on the end of that. Because the one thing with Olave that I don't think he gets enough credit for is he's just a smooth route runner, and he creates separation so easily, and you wouldn't think it. And it's going to be – I'm very interested to see what happens with him when it comes to the draft, because a lot of the rumors and the reason why he came back this past season was because NFL draft scouts were saying, well, he needs to build up more strength. He needs to be able to beat press coverages a little bit better. I don't really think that's an issue. Sometimes he gets stuffed at the line, but he's so quick that he creates that separation. You just need an offensive line to block a little bit longer. And Ohio State's going to, I think, continue to have one of the best offensive lines moving forward. So I do think that they trust him because I want to say, I might be wrong on this, but I'm almost positive the stat that PFF tweeted out the other day is he has not dropped a red zone pass in 2 years. With Ohio State. So, I mean, that's just how reliable he is. We've seen Wilson. We've seen JSN drop balls, maybe not in the red zone, but they've dropped crucial balls. Off the top of my head, I can remember one this year that Chris Olave has dropped as a deep pass that he probably should have caught. And I think that just speaks to what you were just saying about how reliable he is. And those are the guys that you want to go to in big games because you know they're going to make the play.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think Olave is great at tracking the deep ball too. And one of the things I think we saw with Fields is the 1 or 2 games where Olave did miss, Fields did not play as well. I don't remember which game that was last year, but you could tell he really missed Olave, like, as a security blanket. So I'm really high on Olave. I don't think he's going to be an elite receiver, especially early on, but I think he could carve out a really good career in the NFL.
Yeah, I believe it was the Northwestern game.
Yeah, that sounds
That
right.
he was out, and yeah, they were on the struggle bus. They relied very heavily on Trey Sermon in that game.
So now let's move on to the game. This year, I think I've seen a couple people bring this up. The past few years with Harbaugh, when it's been, when they've been up for the Big Ten championship, it's been in Columbus. In 2016, 2018, they finally get a game at home, and people have said that Ohio State hasn't had that many tough road games. The games they've had, in Minnesota. I know that was C.J. Stroud's first game, so I try to take that with a grain of salt. But they had a couple other road games where they didn't necessarily play, as well as they have been playing. So do you think that that's going to play, anything in this game, or do you think it's just they haven't played that many road games, so they haven't had that many opportunities to show that they can really excel there?
Yeah, it's hard to judge how much. I mean, Stroud admitted it after the game that the Minnesota crowd really affected him at times. But like you mentioned, that was really his first game starting. So how much of that can you really put into it? I mean, the only other tough road game they've had, and this might actually lean a little bit more to what you were saying, was when they went to Lincoln and they played Nebraska and they only won 26-17. Like, it was not a great game. It was a game that we expected. It was right off them coming off that Penn State game where I think they won. It was like 33-21 or 24. And we thought, okay, well, they're going to go into Lincoln, Nebraska, and they're going to blow Nebraska out because they're not a good team, right? And Adrian Martinez was playing with a sprained ankle and a broken jaw and still was able to find ways to get him back. C.J. Stroud threw an interception in that game. He had a crucial fumble that almost let Nebraska come back into that game. So I do think that part affects him a little bit, and that's makes sense though, right? He's a true freshman. Not everybody is. I don't want to say he's not a gamer, but that affects everybody in different ways. And the Big House, I've never been. I'll be honest, even though I'm not a fan of that team up north, I would love to go to a game in Ann Arbor because I every time I watch one, especially the game when they're there or when they're in those big games, it looks like a crazy atmosphere. They fit I think it's one of the bigger college stadiums in college, is it not? With the way that they get the fans and everything I hear with the way that the stadium is built, it's like the fans are right on top of you when they're screaming. And this is a big game. I mean, you just mentioned it. This is for the Big Ten championship. Whoever wins this is going to play likely Wisconsin. And this could be a defining game for Jim Harbaugh. I mean, realistically, he's been in a couple of these games. I'm trying to remember which year it was when JT Barrett got the yard. He got the yard. I don't care what anybody else
If
says
you're
because
talking about where he was short, it was 2016.
he was not
If
short. The
that's
ref said he got the
what you're
yard.
referencing.
The ref said he
But
got the yard, which means he got the yard. But
no,
I
I
mean,
agree. I agree. Whatever the call was on the field, it was going to stand. So
yeah.
I'll say that.
But I mean, Harbaugh, he's been in a couple of these games, and the one thing I'll say too with that, and I don't know how deep you want to go into that part, so I'll just say it this way, like, yeah, I think that the crowd and this game could possibly impact him a lot. I think it's going to come down to a lot on Ryan Day to get him some easy passes early, get him into a rhythm, try and get Travion or Mayan and Teague kind of moving on the ground to maybe take some of the pressure off CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I will say also, when I first saw the Ohio State Michigan State game, I was pretty downtrodden because I mean, obviously, we lost to Michigan State and you guys treated them like a rag doll. But and I was happy that Michigan took care of Maryland like they did. And one of the big things I think is Michigan has. If I was Michigan and I won the toss, I would take the ball first and try to score first, because I think if you let Ohio State score first, it's just so much pressure because like with Michigan State, if you let Ohio State score first, you get the ball and say you have a 3 and out. I mean, it happens, but then you're giving them the ball to go up 2 touchdowns. I think you have to score early, get the crowd involved, kind of like they did in 2019, but then they missed the extra point, and then Dobbins fumbled and it bounced right back into his arms. But
Yeah.
that was the right idea to kind of pull out all the stops that first drive, get that score. About Corum, I've heard mixed things, and this might be Harbaugh's gamemanship about Corum,
Yeah.
but I feel a little better with Donovan Edwards catching all those passes last week. I don't know if that was just them trying to do something like Harbaugh likes to do, to show something for Ohio State and then never pull it out again. I always have my doubts on the scheme, because I truly believe that he's only out schemed Ohio State twice. 2016 defensively, and then that I believe was 2017. I thought he had a very good offensive scheme when we were trying out John O'Korn, and just John O'Korn was horrible and threw that last interception. But it's definitely going to be that. I think they can't fall behind to Ohio State. I think they are a little bit mentally stronger than Michigan State, or at least I hope, and they're at home. But that's going to be an interesting matchup if Michigan tries to stop the run, and then the passing game, what Ohio State tends to do when Michigan has those good rush defenders is throw a lot of short passes. So would you think that this would be a big JSN game compared to the other receivers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has the chance to be that, because, I mean, you just mentioned, I just want to echo, I 100% agree with you. I think that they should take the ball first and do everything they can to drive down the field and score, because you do that and you are immediately going to get whatever that is, 70, 80,000, 100,000 plus. I can't remember exactly how much Michigan can get into the big house there, but you're going to have them screaming from the top of their lungs for the entire time Ohio State's out on the field. And the one thing I'll say again, we saw it with Minnesota, we saw it with Oregon, and we saw it with Nebraska. When the crowds are going like that and the defense can rush Stroud, he makes bad decisions. We saw what Oregon was able to do to them. And again, I know it was only his third game, second game, whatever it was at this point. Let me look, because I just had it up. His second game, and I know he was still a little bit injured, but Oregon was able to do to Ohio State what they did without Justin Flo and without Kayvon Thibodeau. Michigan's going to have Hutchinson, and I cannot for the life of me remember the other guy on the other side, but they've got two incredible ends that rush the passer. And while Ohio State's line has been good at run blocking, they've not always been good pass blocking. At times, they've been rated fairly low when it comes to the pass block. So if Michigan can get up on them and then just let Hutchinson and that defensive line just go eat, drop everybody else back in coverage, we've seen CJ Stroud get confused. Now, he's gotten a little bit better at it as the season's gone on, but if they can get pressure with just those 3 or 4 guys and drop the linebackers and the cornerbacks into coverage, it could be a long day for CJ Stroud. But I do believe that because of the way they might be able to get pressure on him, that yes, JSN is likely the guy. I think it could be a big game for him and Henderson if they let him kind of leak out and throw some screen passes to him, some dump offs. I don't know that they'll have the time to do like the wheel routes like you guys saw Donovan Edwards get to do last week, where he had the big game receiving. I'm with you. I wonder if they did do that on tape just for Ohio State to look for it. And to be honest, that's smart on Harbaugh's part, because the cornerbacks and the linebackers are the biggest weakness of that Ohio State defense. If they can get those guys to try and commit to that, and then maybe have like Edwards run out, look like he's going to get a pass, and then just to give it to Haskins as a handoff, and then he hits a hole. I mean, it could be a big game for Michigan. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm a lot more nervous about this game than I was Michigan State, because I just think that they're a better team. The one thing I'll have, and you said that you think they're more mentally prepared than Michigan State is, and I'll ask you, and I know you're not like in the locker room talking to the players, but I'm just curious, do you think that because they have not been able to get that big win against Ohio State, do you think that could be a mental block for them, and possibly even Jim Harbaugh, who's kind of now not just Urban Meyer, but has not been able to beat Ryan Day either?
Yeah, I do think, at least rumors I've heard, is even more than years past, they've been doing, preparation for Ohio State, throughout the year, when they said they hadn't necessarily done that before, which blows my mind that they don't. But and another thing is, I think there's a little, even though they lost to Michigan State, there seems a little bit different with this team, like the Rutgers game, the Nebraska game, and even the Penn State game. I think they would have lost earlier, in previous years. But I do agree with what you're saying. I think as a program, especially when they play Ohio State, when things go bad, they're like, oh, here we go again. So that's why I said they need to jump early, get a score, get that confidence up, because if they go down, 7-10 points, I think it's going to be like, well, what do we do now? So I think that's a very good point about that. So
Yeah,
let's move
I
on
think it's
to go
real
ahead.
quick. I think it's crazy that you just said that. I didn't realize that Michigan doesn't like Ohio State. As soon as the season's over, it's when do we play that team up north again? They have a countdown counter in the locker room for that. They prepare a little bit. They talk about how much they want to beat them every single week, even if they're playing somebody else. So I find that a little bit crazy that you said that. I thought maybe Michigan felt the same way and did the same thing. So that's
Well,
interesting to
not to
hear that.
say that they haven't, but from what I heard, it's even like amped up more. Which
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how that is, but I think too. I think you know we're going way long on this Michigan Ohio State talk, but that's fine. So what I try to tell people too, because they're like, well, Iowa's beating Ohio State and Purdue's beating Ohio State. I do agree that has happened, but I think people outside of the rivalry don't understand what Ohio State brings to this game. Like it it means everything to them. They are never going to overlook Michigan. I don't care how bad Michigan is. They could be 0-11. They're never going to overlook them, and they want to put their foot on their throat regardless, especially since Tressel's been gone, because Tressel was fine winning 14-3. Once
Yeah.
Urban came in there, he was like, let me win 70-3. So that I think that's been the biggest thing. And I've talked to surprisingly, I have way too many friends in Jacksonville that are Ohio State fans also. And I say, although I was happy when Tressel was, at the time let go,
Yeah.
but I think Harbaugh would have matched up way better against those Tressel teams because it's the same type of matchup. And we're still trying to retool everything defensively. The idea was to blitz and everything, and then that game with Haskins where he threw the ball over the field. So we've kind of mixed up the defense. So I'm wondering how that goes. We have struggled with up-tempo teams. So I'm wondering, if Ohio State goes a little more up-tempo, but it will be interesting. And it's going to be the same thing every year, even when we lose by 30. I get really hyped up, the day of the game. And I'm hyped, usually through the first quarter. And then it slowly and slowly gets, kind of comes in that, we're going to lose. But I mean, you know, one time we're going to break through. So I
Yeah.
keep on trying to be positive in everything. And even, regardless of the outcome, I think Harbaugh has shown a change in the team this year, moving forward. But obviously, I think to me, it depends on what the score of this game is and how they look, competitive wise in the game. So yeah. So now we'll move on, and I know you have been speaking highly of Cincinnati all year, trying to get into the playoff. I did not see them beating SMU like they did this past week.
Yeah.
It was a huge victory. They shut down Tanner Mordecai. Dennis Ritter, your guy, had a very strong performance. Do you think that them being SMU by that much kind of solidified if they win out, they can get in the playoff, or do you think people just don't take them serious?
I think if they would have done this for a couple weeks, they probably would be 4 when the rankings are released Tuesday night. I think they're going to move Michigan up to 4 and keep Cincinnati at 5. And I say that because for 2 reasons. We know Ohio State and Michigan play each other this week, so we know that's going to resolve itself, right? One of those teams is going to fall out, whoever loses, whether it's Ohio State or Michigan, whoever loses is going to fall out of that top 4. But I also think the committee is a little bit afraid to put Cincinnati in the top 4 because then they have to justify removing them later if somebody else jumps up, a la 2015, when I believe they had TCU in there. It was TCU or Baylor, and then they removed them to put Ohio State in. And it caused all that backlash. And granted, I think Ohio State, in a way, proved them right because they ended up going on and winning the national championship. But I don't think they want to do that. So I think Cincinnati deserves to be in the playoffs. They're undefeated. You can only beat who's on the schedule. You can't go beat Alabama if they're not on your schedule. Granted, I don't know that they'd beat Alabama. They played everybody. SMU was a good matchup. They get East Carolina, which is a decent team, and I believe they'll get Houston in the championship game, which could be another really big game because that's a really good offense. If that defense can play the way they did against SMU for the next 2 weeks, I think they've got a realistic shot to get in. And I hope that they do get in. I've said a lot of people say that they're going to get blown out. Well, you know what? We've watched Notre Dame get blown out for years, and I don't want to see an 8-1 Notre Dame team that I think we can all be honest is not as good as any of the Notre Dame teams we've seen in the recent past get into the playoffs. Go out there and get blown out by Georgia. Everybody wants to overlook I believe it was the Sugar Bowl last year. Maybe it wasn't. I can't remember what bowl game it was. But Cincinnati hung with Georgia. And Georgia had a better team. They had JT Daniels out there. They had George Pickens out there. The offense, the running game was humming. The defense was good. Now, they weren't as good as they were this year, but Cincinnati hung with them. I don't know that Cincinnati would beat Georgia. In fact, I'd probably bet a large amount of money that they won't beat Georgia. But I think they'd keep it more competitive than what we've seen from some of these other teams that have made it in as the 4 seed. I think they could keep it to a 7-14 type game, which is a competitive game. I have hesitation sometimes about Ritter, but I'm going to be honest. He put it on his shoulders against SMU and did it. He did the damn thing this past weekend and won them the game, and that defense came to play as well. So I think they deserve to be in, and I hope they get that shot.
I think the obviously what they're pulling for is Georgia to beat Alabama in the SEC championship. So that, because if that happens, Michigan, Ohio State, whoever loses is going to be out of the race. At least we think. So that would just mean, the winner of that game and the winner of that, and then Cincinnati, and then, that's why I wanted to talk about who in that scenario, who would be the 4th team then? Would it be a Notre Dame, or could a team like Oklahoma State win in the Big 12 get in there? I wanted to get your opinion on if all that works out like how we think it's going to. So The Big 10 winner, the SEC winner, Cincinnati, and who would be that 4th team?
Yeah, so I'm just going to say this as a homer take. I'm not saying that Ohio State's going to win, but because I'm a homer, I'm going to say that they win. I think if they win, they clearly jump to 2, and I do expect Georgia to beat Bama, so they're going to stay at 1. Then that opens up 2 spots. There's a lot of people who believe Bama would still be in it if they only lose by like 3 to 7 points, which I don't necessarily think they're wrong because there's not a lot of other teams that have really proven anything. Now, granted, we've never seen the committee put a 2-loss team in, but Bama comes with a different cachet because for whatever reason, even though the committee says they don't look at the past, they clearly do when it comes to Bama because Bama, in my opinion, has not been the second best team for a long time this year, but they stay at 2 because they're Bama. I think the only other teams left in it are Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma would have to win this week against Oklahoma State, and then I believe they would play Oklahoma State again in the Big 12 championship. If they won that again, I do think there's a chance that they would get in because that they would still be a 1-loss team. And they would have beaten a team that I think many believe is the best defense in the Big 12 twice, it was a nice feather in their cap. If Oklahoma State wins, I believe then they would play Baylor. I don't know how much the committee would value Baylor, but I could still see Oklahoma State getting in because they're a conference championship with 1 loss. The biggest one is Notre Dame, and I don't know how to value them because they've looked better. But in my opinion, they can't get in over Cincinnati because Cincinnati beat them. And if you want to talk about head-to-head matters, they've already gone out on the field and they've proven that Cincinnati was the better team. And in my opinion, Cincinnati has gotten better since then as well. So you can't tell me that even though Notre Dame has gotten better, well, so has Cincinnati. And they already beat them when they were both at their low points. Cincinnati is the better team. What might hurt Notre Dame in this scenario is they're not in a conference, so they don't play a conference championship. So while everybody else gets to go out there next Saturday and look good in a conference championship game, Notre Dame is sitting at home doing nothing. So I think there's a realistic shot if Bama gets blown out that Cincinnati and then possibly Oklahoma State, if they're able to reel off 2 wins, could jump in and be that 4th team. But I just have this bad feeling that it's going to be Bama. And if Bama stays in, I think that they'll put them at 3 because I don't think that they want to see a rematch of Georgia-Alabama in the first round. So then that would put Cincinnati at 4. So we would see Cincy, Georgia, and then Bama, Ohio State. But I think it's all going to come down to what happens, obviously, in that Bama-Georgia game. And then if Oklahoma State can win out, because regardless, in my opinion, I think Cincinnati should be in. We'll see if it happens.
I do think the loss by Oregon really helped clear a better path for Cincinnati. And my only thing with Cincinnati, and this is the same when UCF was going undefeated, if you really want to be counted in that, you need to win decisively in that conference. And both at UCF and Cincinnati have had games that have been way closer than they should have been. But I think this win over SMU kind of, for Cincinnati at least, kind of puts some of that to bed, since, the SMU team was so good. So we'll kind of close out the show with just a little bit of Devy player talk. So Dabo said that Justin Ross is having a procedure and that he's going to declare for the draft this year. We know that he was great as a freshman, then had those injury concerns. He came back this year, but that whole Clemson offense hasn't looked great. Where do you see Justin Ross in the draft? Do you think, just based on potential, he could be a day 2 guy, or do you think all the injury concerns will push him down into, say, the 4th, 5th round?
I would be very surprised if he's a day 2 guy. I think the one thing with him, how he tests at the combine, I don't know the procedure that he's having, so hopefully he'll be healthy enough to participate in the combine. If he goes out there and tests well, the biggest thing is going to come down to what happens with the medicals. Now, guys like us are not going to be able to see that, so we're only going to be able to speculate. Maybe a couple rumors drop here or there. But I think that's going to be the biggest thing is what happens with the medicals. Because, again, I mean, there was a point in time last year where we thought he was never going to play football again. And usually when you have an injury like that, you don't just come back. He has not really been that good this year. I think if he'd come out and played really well, and then like, okay, well, he's going to have another procedure, maybe we would have looked at him like a Mike Williams. And I don't want to do the helmet scouting, but like a Mike Williams, because he had that really serious, I believe, the back injury. And then he comes out and they're like, oh, well, what's he going to do? And then he still goes first round. I think the medicals are going to be key, but I would be really surprised if he goes 2nd or 3rd round. I think he's likely a at best 4th round, but I would think he's probably a 5th or 6th round pick.
And you would know better than me. I believe, was it his freshman season or sophomore season when they played Ohio State? And I believe T. Higgins got hurt, and Justin Ross really wasn't able to separate against that good Ohio State secondary also.
Yeah.
So I don't remember which year that was. Clemson ended up winning, but it was mostly because of Trevor Lawrence's running the ball. I don't remember which year, but I that kind of gave me pause for Justin Ross, because they were, really depending on him, and he couldn't get off that press coverage. And we've seen all those Clemson receivers. Felix did that great video on DJU on the Campus Canton YouTube. So I would say definitely check that out. I watched that earlier today. That those receivers just aren't showing separation. And the same with Justin Ross. If he doesn't have separation and add on the injury, I don't know where he'll go, because there's some good receivers the past year that a lot of people are high on, and they were contested catch receivers, and the NFL just is not going towards that anymore.
Yeah, I'm almost positive it had to have been his sophomore year, because if I'm remembering correctly, his junior year, that was the year that he was hurt. And that would have been the year that Ohio State went like ballistic on him, because I was like celebrating wildly on Twitter with that win, because that was my national championship, because Alabama absolutely destroyed him. So yeah, I'm almost positive it was his sophomore year. And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we hear Felix talk about it all the time, right? Like, as you just mentioned, the NFL is moving away from those contested catch guys, and I do think that that's kind of what he is. Now, granted, if I'm remembering correctly in that game, I mean, he had guys like Denzel Ward on him, which Jeff Okudah, which I know Okuda's injured this year for the Lions. We've seen Denzel Ward, when he's not injured, he plays one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. So he is going up against the best of the best. But even when you go into the NFL, you're playing guys who maybe not are at that level, but they're only like half a step down on most of these NFL teams. You're playing better competition than what you're getting in the ACC. So I think, with him and the contested catch, I mean, he'd have to go to a team that's going to use him the right way. And again, I don't think he's going to get the draft capital for it to really play out for a lot of people. He's going to be a guy that I think we're likely going to see him as like a 3rd or 4th round dart throw in our rookie drafts.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And just, kind of quickly, I know you've talked about this. Everyone's down on the 2022 class. While I don't think it's as great as previous classes, I don't think it's as far down. And you've spoken to the same thing. I think the biggest part is you don't have those elite quarterbacks, that we know are going to be good like this past year's. we've seen this year they've struggled. I mean, I know it's just their rookie year. But also, the running backs, there's Brees Hall and Isaiah Spiller. But I think wide receiver wise, they might not have top end, elite guys. But I think the wide receiver class is very deep after the top five. The top five, I think we're looking at both Ohio State receivers, Olave and Wilson, Treylon Burke from Arkansas. Depending on, if you talk to an analytics guy, David Bell from Purdue, and, Drake London. And then we have a lot of receivers after that. What are some of a couple receivers you like outside those, top five?
Yeah, so for me, I tend to rank my guys in tiers. My tier one right now is a couple of the guys you mentioned. It's Wilson, it's Burks, it's London, and Bell. I still like Bell a lot because I view him. I've said I think he's the Rashad Bateman of this class. He's not going to get the respect he deserves, but he's going to go out there and produce on the NFL field. We've already seen him going out there and produce for Baltimore. After that, I'm with you. I think this class is a lot deeper than people give it credit for. You talked about the quarterbacks really quick. I agree that they don't have any top end guys, but if 4 or 5 of those guys go, and I think there's a shot at least 4 or 5 of those guys go in the first round, they're going to get drafted in your rookie drafts because most of the rookie drafts, at least we play in, are super flex. So that's 5 picks. That's almost the first round of your rookie draft right there. Then you talked about 3 or 4 running backs and wide receiver. There's at least 11 guys that I like that I'd be willing to draft. That's almost a whole round right there too. So now you're talking about that's 2 whole rounds of a rookie draft. Realistically, if we go back and look at rookie drafts in the past, that's about where you feel comfortable anyway. There's not a lot of drafts that we go into the third round thinking, oh man, I'm so glad I'm getting this player in the third round. At that point, you're talking about dart throws like, well, this guy did this or did that in college, and I think he can be this in the NFL. Some of the guys that I like outside of that, Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky, transferred from Nebraska. He's really proven that he can be a good player this year, and the versatility that he has, I think, is big. Zay Flowers out of Boston College. A lot of people contribute how good Phil Jerkovich has been because of Zay Flowers. You got Jahan Dotson out of Penn State, Khalil Shakir out of Boise State, who just got the Senior Bowl invite. He could be a guy that blows up. A guy that's not getting a lot of talk, and I don't know that he'd come out, but Jalen Cropper out of Fresno State, he's got talked a lot about this offseason and coming into the season. He's a guy very much like Wan'Dale Robinson, can be used all over the field that I think is interesting. And then, Dante Wright out of Colorado State, Romeo Doubs, Nevada, Dante Demas, big thing with him is how is he going to come back from that injury? And then last but not least, my guy Calvin Austin out of Memphis. The NFL has moved. They've started drafting these smaller guys. We saw it again last year with, my God, his name escapes me, and I cannot remember what it is. But the Rams, Tutu Atwell, the Rams drafted him in the second round. If you actually go and look, we've seen a lot of teams drafting these guys who are like right around the 5'9", 5'10" range. And the difference with Austin is he literally has track speed. He walked onto Memphis as a track star and went and played football. In his first year, he was more of like a track star trying to play football, and he's become a football player with track speed. He wins a lot on the outside in college. Don't know if he can do that in the NFL, but I think he could be a really dangerous slot weapon. He's a guy that I really like. He's going to the Senior Bowl. Would not be surprised if by February, after the Senior Bowl and everything is over with, Calvin Austin is that guy that gets that massive Senior Bowl bump and everybody's talking about him.
Yeah, I like a lot of those names that you spoke about. One that I think he could move up into the top 5 is Jameson Williams at Alabama. This past week, Colin came on my other pod, and we did, rookie first round mock, a way too early one. And I actually took Jameson Williams at the end of the first round just because I think he's going to get, at the very least, second round draft capital. He has that speed. He gets that Bama bump that, all those wide receivers seem to get, regardless if they deserve it or not. And I like how he seems to be able to be more of a complete receiver than I thought he would be. I thought he would be just to take off the top guy, but they throw short passes to him. They throw intermediate passes to him. He shows more strength than I think you would imagine. And, I know he couldn't make it in that, Ohio State wide receiver room, but he, had dealt with some injuries. So, and I think he's really showing that. And a couple other guys, I like, you said Dante Demas. I wonder how he comes back from that injury because, he was playing better than Raheem Jarrett, who everyone thought was going to take over there. For Nevada, Romeo Doubs, I don't know where he'll get drafted, but I just like him as a playmaker. It just seems like he always makes plays, and I feel like, he's not going to be a day 2 guy, but he could come out and really play well, and he could be a late sleeper. And then a couple other guys that are probably more day 3 guys. I really like Tyquan Thornton from Baylor. It's funny. I was looking for highlights of him this year, and all like the YouTube videos are from 2019. So I still have to look for that. But he shows good speed. He's a good route runner. I think he could probably test pretty well. And another player, I know the analytics probably won't be great on him since it's his 5th year, but Charleston Rambo, coming from Oklahoma, and this year at Miami, he's played really well. He's kind of been their go-to receiver. I don't necessarily know how he's going to test, and he's a 5th year guy. But, and all the names that you said, I think it's a very, very deep class, and it's going to be very interesting. I think a ton of those guys could go, day 1, day 2. So there could be a ton of receivers. And people have been talking about totally trading out of the 2022 draft. What I would do is, if I had a top 5 pick, I would try to trade back and get a couple picks, in the late first, in the second, because I think that's really where the value is.
Yeah, that was a major oversight on my part, not mentioning Jameson Williams. I'm with you. I think there's a realistic shot he gets first-round draft capital. Good for him. Good for him. Him and his dad started a lot of stuff on Twitter after his transfer, and a lot of people are talking crap about him, and he's definitely proven a lot of people right. So I'm rooting for him to get good draft capital and do something in the NFL.
Yeah, I think I heard Jameson Williams said some comments about Ohio State fans recently. So I'm guessing that he's not.
I didn't see that.
I didn't see what he said, but he was kind of like talking about, I guess, how Ohio State fans are. Which I don't know exactly what he said, but I'm sure that there's not going to be any welcoming parties for him anytime soon.
Oh yeah, I'm sure not. I'd have to look, but yeah. I'll look that up on Twitter to see what he said. I'm sure he doesn't. Not a lot of love is lost there for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Do you think that it was mostly his injury, or do you think they just maybe scouted him, or what do you think cost him not even getting on the field?
I think Olave coming back cost him the most because they do the same thing. And no disrespect to Jameson Williams, and I'll ask you because you said the same thing, and I'm pretty sure I know your answer. I would take Olave over Jameson Williams right now. Like I think Olave is the better player, and so I think that's what hurt him because he's not better than JSN. He's not better than Garrett Wilson. He's not better than Chris Olave. And I don't think he wanted to continue to be that second guy. And then when Chris Olave came back, well, now he just got jumped by these 2 guys, a sophomore and JSN, a redshirt freshman, whatever he considers himself now. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, he's probably looking at it like, well, hey, if I don't leave, I have to stay another year. And I don't think he wanted to wait till he was a senior. It was a great move by him. I mean, again, he goes to Alabama, and he's proven exactly how good he was. He just couldn't break on the field because those players are all just a little bit better than him.
No, I agree, and I think you guys talked about this on Devy Debate when he decided to transfer to Alabama. I was really high on this freshman wide receiving class for Alabama that no one has really produced much, and I was surprised when Jameson Williams went to Alabama because at the time it didn't make a ton of sense, but obviously, Saban knows what he's doing, and, brought him in, and he's really saved a lot of that wide receiving core, and he's definitely skyrocketed past John Mechie. So and that's another guy that who knows where he'll necessarily go because he hasn't really produced like everyone thought he would this year. So so I think there's tons of wide receivers and everything. So so I think that's it for the show, and I want to thank you, Matt, for coming on and talking a lot of Buckeye football, which I know you love.
I do, absolutely. So I appreciate it.
No problem. And we'll have you on again later on when you'll be able to talk more about those projects that are coming out later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to jumping on with you again to release the breaking news of what we've got coming down the pipelines.
All right, sounds good. So that'll be the second episode of Decoding Devy, and we'll see you guys next week.